This organization is special. It means so much to so many people. It's a special place to work, too. Our staff...
The rumors never truly died. They lingered, creeping through baseball circles like stubborn smoke that refused to clear, whispered in late-night radio discussions, and tossed around on fan forums with equal parts excitement and dread. Nolan Arenado, traded to the Angels? For months, it felt like background noise, a piece of speculation that simply belonged to the off-season echo chamber. But this time, it has a pulse. This time, respected voices are talking, analyzing, debating, and perhaps most importantly, this time, both organizations stand at crossroads that may just lead them right into each other's arms. And suddenly, what once sounded laughable now sounds inevitable. Because baseball is never simply about numbers on a spreadsheet or names on a roster. It's timing, it's desperation, it's legacy, it's mistakes, haunting franchises until they either correct them or collapse beneath them. For the Angels, a team that has lived in the shadows of disappointment for far too long, there is always a hunger for relevance, a craving for a superstar presence that feels familiar to them. Mike Trout aging, Shohei Ohtani gone, the fan base restless and tired. And then, floating in the middle of this uncertainty, like a shining possibility wrapped in equal parts hope and gamble, the name Nolan Arenado. The Locked On Angels and Locked On Cardinals crossover didn't feel like a normal discussion. It felt like a crossroads conversation, something bigger than two podcasts chatting baseball. It felt like a courtroom argument over a franchise's fate. On one side, JD from Locked On Cardinals, persistent, confident, almost relentless in his mission to convince Los Angeles that Arenado is not just a player to consider, but the answer to a question the Angels have been asking themselves for years. What is the identity of this team? On the other side, the Super Halo Bros, John and Mike, representing a skeptical Angels fan base scarred by expensive mistakes, aging stars who never delivered, and front office decisions that felt like shiny illusions instead of solutions. Their conversation was more than words. It was tension built over seasons of disappointment, frustration layered beneath fan loyalty, and organizations fighting to escape the traps of their own making. The Angels desperately want to be relevant. The Cardinals desperately want to move forward. And Nolan Arenado sits in the middle of it all, no longer just a name, but a decision that could shape both franchises' futures. JD didn't waste time. He walked into the conversation like an attorney ready to argue a case he believed he would win. The first thing he didn't pitch was numbers. He pitched legacy. "You're talking about getting a future Hall of Famer," he said confidently, and there was no dishonesty in that claim. Arenado's resume still towers. The Gold Gloves, the MVP votes, the highlights that look unreal even in slow motion. Players like him don't come around often. Players like him don't become available often, and yet here he is, possibly waiting for a phone call that could change everything. He spoke of Arenado as more than a contract, more than a declining stat line, more than a battered back. He spoke about him like a guardian of professionalism, a standard bearer for how baseball should be played, obsessed with preparation, obsessed with execution, obsessed with respect for the craft. For a franchise like the Angels, who have been accused of lacking direction, lacking discipline, lacking structure, despite having stars, it's almost impossible not to feel the allure of that kind of leadership. JD didn't paint Arenado as a loud locker room general barking orders. No, he painted him as a presence, a man you learn from simply by watching, a man younger players gravitate toward naturally, a man who silently demands excellence because of how he handles his own business. And yes, he also acknowledged the elephant in the room, the decline. Because you can't talk about Arenado in 2026 without talking about the nagging back issues, the decreasing power, the lower slugging numbers, the missed games, the streak of years where he no longer stood atop the third base defensive throne like he once did unquestioned. The Angels fan base is tired of hope deals, tired of maybe if he bounces back contracts. They gave Anthony Rendon a monstrous deal built on hope and superstar expectation and watched it rot before their eyes. They've been promised veteran leadership before, only to receive empty leadership speeches paired with disappointing on-field performance. So when JD spoke, he wasn't speaking to naive fans. He was speaking to scarred fans. Fans who needed a reason to trust again. So he didn't hide. He confronted it. The injuries matter. The numbers dipped. Arenado was human again after years of being mythic. But then he made a point that suddenly made everything feel different. When Arenado was healthy, even in what people are branding as his down years, he was still producing at a level better than many third basemen in baseball. In the first half of last season, before injuries took control, he was dangerous, he was productive, he was stabilizing. He was quite simply still Nolan Arenado. The issue wasn't that Arenado was washed. The issue was that Arenado pushed himself to be something he physically couldn't be anymore. A 162-game warrior. Maybe he shouldn't be. Maybe he shouldn't have to be. Maybe the next version of Nolan Arenado isn't every game Iron Man, but 120 games of impact. Protected, preserved, and allowed to simply be great when he can.
And then there's California. Arenado is a California kid. Playing closer to home isn't pressure anymore. It's peace, it's purpose, it's comfort. At this point in his career, that matters more than people think. There was emotion when JD spoke about that. There was belief, because every athlete eventually reaches that phase in their career where they start thinking less about legacy numbers and more about personal fulfillment. Playing in front of family, playing in warm weather, playing somewhere that feels emotionally right. Arenado in Angel Red back in California, that isn't a gimmick, that's fuel. But while JD campaigned passionately for Arenado, the Angels side of the conversation carried its own emotional weight. Mike and John didn't speak like analysts. They spoke like fans layered in battle scars. They've been promised name value before. They've been sold hope wrapped in shiny PR language. They've watched players arrive in Anaheim with glowing descriptions of everything they'll bring to the organization, only to crash, disappoint, or simply fade away. And when they say they want production more than clubhouse leadership, they mean it with exhaustion in their voices. Because the Angels don't need symbolism, they need wins. Still, something shifted when JD reminded everyone of one key detail. This isn't a 7-year trap. This isn't a franchise chaining financial anchor. This is 2 years. 2 years of Arenado, 2 years of potential impact, 2 years that do not destroy payroll flexibility. The Rockies are still paying part of it. The Angels wouldn't be suffocated by the deal. For once, the money isn't terrifying. And money matters. Always. The second half of this conversation wasn't emotional. It was surgical. Contract breakdowns, salary obligations, competitive balance tax numbers. The Angels are under the threshold. Arenado's adjusted financial hit isn't catastrophic. The Cardinals have already shown a willingness to send money with players if it means clearing direction and planning for the future, as seen in the Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras trades. They've shown they are no longer prideful. They are practical. The question isn't, can the Angels afford Arenado? It's, how much are the Cardinals willing to offset to make Arenado attractive enough that the Angels feel safe pulling the trigger? And the answer feels increasingly like enough. Because the Cardinals have made a choice. They are transitioning, resetting, aligning with a younger timeline. Arenado deserves a timeline he doesn't have to wait years for. And whether anyone likes it or not, the Cardinals failed Arenado. They promised contention. They delivered inconsistency. So what would it take? That's the puzzle both sides now must solve. The Angels want Arenado, but not at emotional desperation cost. The Cardinals want talent back, but also clarity. JD made something crystal clear. St. Louis is not in panic mode. They are in restructuring mode. That means arms. That means youth. That means value. It may mean players that Angels fans won't want to lose, but a future Hall of Famer, even a slightly aged one, still commands respect in negotiation. The reality is simple. If Arenado becomes an Angel, it isn't because the Angels were fooled by name value. It will be because two franchises looked into the mirror and realized the move made too much sense to ignore. The Cardinals need to move forward. The Angels need relevance, structure, credibility, and a third baseman who is still better than anyone they've had at the hot corner in far too long. Something else lingered beneath this entire conversation. Emotion. JD didn't speak like someone happily discarding a player. You could hear it. Pain, frustration, regret, a sense of loss tied with respect. He doesn't want Arenado gone because he doesn't believe in him. He wants Arenado gone because he believes Arenado deserves better than the organizational confusion the Cardinals sank into. And deep down, Angels fans know why this hurts. Because they too have watched legends lose meaningful years in situations that deserve better. They watched Trout remain loyal while the team crumbled around him. They watched Ohtani perform miracles in a franchise unable to build a foundation strong enough to support superstardom. So suddenly,
Angels fans don't just look at Arenado and see a risk, they see a reflection. A star trapped in the wrong moment of his career, desperate for just one last run at meaning. Baseball isn't math, it's emotion disguised as strategy. It's longing disguised as logistics. Nolan Arenado to the Angels isn't a rumor floating in empty space anymore. It feels like a story forming, a crossroads aligning. Two organizations staring at the same turning point and realizing stepping forward means stepping toward each other. Will it happen? That depends on money, ego, bravery, timing. But after listening to this crossover, one thing has become impossible to deny. This isn't fantasy talk anymore. This isn't blind speculation. This is real. This is logical. This is emotional. This is baseball at its most human crossroads. And if it happens, if Nolan Arenado puts on that Angels uniform, if he walks into that clubhouse, if he stands beside Mike Trout under the California sun with a crowd desperate to believe again, then this won't just be a trade. It will be a statement. A declaration that the Angels are finally willing to make a bold move that isn't reckless, but calculated. That isn't about flashy headlines, but about substance, leadership, and proven greatness. And for Nolan Arenado, it would be a chance. A chance to write one more powerful chapter rather than watch his career quietly fade behind disappointment and organizational failure. Now, both fan bases wait. The baseball world watches. And somewhere in between cautious hope and heavy skepticism, the Arenado rumors are no longer whispers. They're knocking.